because I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forward. Together, that's exactly where we're going to go. God bless.
I'm Steve Walters.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
And this is Rewind, Wisconsin Eye's summary of this week in the Capitol. The Bucks deal, it came together, it was announced, trumpets, seashells and balloons, as Al McGuire used to say. But it plays out on two different levels, JR. There's the math and how you do a $500 million deal, and then there's the raw politics.
Yes.
So let's take a quick look at just the math side before we get into the fascinating raw politics. Okay. $250 million from Bucks owners and $100 million from past owner Senator Herb Kohl. We pretty much knew this stuff. Yep. $250 million that breaks down this way. $93 million from the Wisconsin Center District, which gets its revenues from what? Room tax?
Room tax, car rentals, and food and beverage prepared, and basically restaurants and bars.
Okay, but it is now paying for the convention center?
Yes, so those bonds would be issued, but they wouldn't be able to start paying on them for
13?
a dozen years, something like that.
Right.
So extends those taxes
right.
Much beyond what they were used to pay off the convention center.
And the governor says when you extend a tax, it is not, read my lips, tax hike. $55 million loan from state government, and when you pay that off, it totals $80 million. I almost said billion, excuse me. $55 million state collection of Milwaukee County debt. Well, you heard yesterday, Milwaukee County has an outstanding debt of $120 million. They're adding to it at the rate of $15 to $20 million a year, and the state is going to do better than Milwaukee County at collecting this debt.
The state created a new program, I think in 2009, to begin collecting these outstanding debts. They also have the TRIP program, Tax Return Intercept Program.
Yes.
And so if you're going to get a return of $500, but you owe $400,
right.
They can grab it right from your tax return, stuff like that. So there are tools the state has that are available to other people in terms of collecting these. Now, is it sound money? I've heard Department of Revenue is convinced it can pull that money together from what's there.
That's what Chandler told the news reporters yesterday, that they can do a much better job than County of Milwaukee collecting past debt and score it at $4 million a year. Which remains to be seen. $47 million City of Milwaukee parking structure, TIF financing. Common Council President Michael Murphy is convening the council to have the first session on this today. And how major a concession is this? The Bucks owners would be responsible for any cost overruns. Big deal?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a nice protection, if you will, for the state and taxpayers from not having to do anything else that comes in and above the $500 million.
Yep. And then who pays what? Quickly, 50% current past Bucks owners, 39% Milwaukee City County governments, 11% of state government. And what did you think of the way the governors and Barrett and Abley were selling it? What do you think of this cheaper to keep theme?
It's an interesting concept. What was it? A couple months ago from the Walker, it was a much different theme. Yeah. But they're trying to persuade people of it costs more to lose these guys than it does to keep them. So yes, we're putting money into arena, but if they go away, you lose the $6 million a year. We're getting now in jock taxes that would grow. Yep. In theory, because they're going to sign new TV contracts. We have the Bradley Center, which is $100 million between deferred maintenance and
what's still owed?
Debt. Yeah. And oh, by the way, there'd be no anchor tenant anymore in that building.
Right.
What's its value then without that? Somebody's earning the revenue. So they're trying to say this is actually there is a cost.
Right.
Because people outstate, if you ask lawmakers outstate, they're like, what's the benefit for me? What's it matter if the Bucks stay or go because I'm from Neenah or Eau Claire
Hudson.
or
Representative Dean Knutson, he lights up. He goes, he is so against this plan, but go ahead.
What's it do for me? What's it do for my taxpayers? They're trying to say there is an impact for your taxpayers.
Yeah.
They lose us $6 million a year that impacts what goes to your school. So that's the sell, if you will, right now on the Bucks arena.
Yeah, let's actually look at the 20-year loss numbers that the governor and his aides and the mayor and the county executive put out. If Bucks leave, Wisconsin loses $419 million over 20 years. And how's that break down? $130 million in income taxes on current NBA salaries. $169 million, as you said, in future income taxes, because those pro basketball players are going to get paid a whole lot more soon. And there's going to be a much bigger broadcast deal. And then, as you said, $100 million still owed in the Bradley Center, $20 million in required Bradley Center maintenance. Cheaper to keep the Bucks here, which is, well, okay. We'll see how that plays out. Any impressions watching the governor flanked by Abley and Barrett there yesterday at the podium?
Interesting that two guys who ran against each other twice are right next to each other up there. That's one. Then Vos makes some reference to the debates.
He said he watched the debates and glad they could agree. But
yeah. So if you look at that list, though, what's interesting? Who has the smallest share? The city of Milwaukee.
47.
Yeah, they're the one. And you know, it's interesting. You talk to Republicans, they will tell you that Abley's been a very willing partner, if you will, in this whole endeavor and praise him. They rip Barrett, but Barrett got out of this without any property tax dollars, right? So, you know, it's an interesting tact, if you will, that he took.
Well, let's actually take a couple minutes and listen to clips from Walker and County Executive Abley and Tom Barrett yesterday at the press conference.
There's also provisions to protect the taxpayers that if for some reason the Bucks were to be sold, again, which we can anticipate when you're going to get this great new arena, it's going to be a catalyst in downtown Milwaukee for both the city and the county and the region. But if for some reason they were to sell the team, again, we put in very comprehensive provisions that allow clawback so that if a purchase of the team is made, the provisions of that would allow first draw to be taken. Those dollars out of the proceeds of the sale would go back to all the partners in the public sector to make sure the public was reimbursed for the monies that are owed and the monies that were spent before the new owners or before the owners would receive proceeds from that. So again, on every measure, you look at this is one where it truly protects the taxpayers.
The Park East is land in Milwaukee that has sat empty for almost 2 decades. I don't think there's anybody who's unclear. If there was a lot of fantastic opportunities that we had for giant development in the Park East, there is nobody, and I mean nobody, who wouldn't leap at the opportunity to take them. So when you hear people talk about this deal as once in a generation, it's more than that.
So the dollar amount that we are investing as a city is very, very close to what we invested when the city of Milwaukee invested when the Bradley Center was constructed. That to me is a fair deal. It's also a fair deal, I think, when you see what the state is receiving here. The state, in terms of revenue, as the governor indicated, benefits immensely by having the Bucks stay here.
So much for the math and the numbers part of it, but I know you well enough to know you and I are both fascinated by the raw politics. How does it get passed? I see 3 options, and correct me if I'm wrong. Joint Finance could add this to their budget, or you add it as a floor amendment in either the House or the Senate, whoever gets a budget bill first. Has that been resolved? Do we?
Last I checked, no.
Right. Still don't know. Or third, you could run it as a separate bill. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's talk about it in the budget.
Okay.
Pluses or minuses in the budget. In the budget, it gives Republicans some cover, if you will, to vote for it because it's in the mix of all the other things they want to see, right? It's their budget. They have to pass it. So there's a benefit there. Out of the budget, well, the downside is you get no Democratic votes because no Democrat's going to vote for a budget that cuts UW system $250 million.
Right.
That doesn't undermine.
$250 million is the same that the locals and states are okay, go ahead.
That doesn't fund, in their minds, education adequately. That I mean, they're not going to vote for this budget. So you have to do it Republicans by themselves, but it gives your outstate lawmakers a reason, incentive, if you will, to put it in, to vote for it.
Okay.
Out of the budget, you're going to lose a bunch of outstate Republican lawmakers on this deal. They don't see any incentive for doing it. That means you need Democratic votes to pass a bill. The plus of that, though, is 5 years ago, there were ads run in the fall elections over a $5 million scoreboard that was in the Building Commission budget that nailed Democrats outstate for supporting that. Can you imagine the ads that would be run next fall for $250 million for a Bucks arena from taxpayers for outstate vulnerable Republican lawmakers? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. So if it's a separate bill and you get Democratic votes, it gives you possibly some cover that they like, well, you can't really attack us because you're vulnerable as well. So there's that.
If it's offered as a floor amendment, do you see Dems voting for it?
Possibly.
City of Milwaukee Dem legis?
Final passage? I just don't see final passage in the budget that they vote for it.
Well, I don't think the City of Milwaukee Dems get a chance to have it both ways. On a floor amendment, to add it to the budget, they can vote yes and then ultimately vote no against the budget, correct?
Well, yes. And Lena Taylor today put out a release saying that the state should pay its fair share. She's still unhappy. She wants more state money into this.
She wants the original Walker plan, $220 million from the jock tax.
Here's the other thing. If it's out of the budget and you require Democratic votes to pass this bill, you empower the minority. You
Yes.
never want to do that. You are giving them the opportunity to say, okay, horse trading is illegal in Wisconsin, but there are ways around that to say, I can give you X votes on the Bucks bill, but I need this and this. So that bill we don't like, make it go away. We don't want to deal with that. So if you want this, I have to have that. And I get this sense that Republicans aren't necessarily enthused about the idea of voting for public financing for a Bucks Arena, but the governor put a lot of effort into this a couple months ago. The $220 million he's going to borrow and pay back solely the jock taxes. He went out there yesterday and owned this during the news conference. This is our plan. Cheaper to keep him. Made a big deal about it. They don't want to embarrass him and have the Bucks leave under his watch. So they feel like they need to get it done, but how? That's the big question. And in or out is going to be the biggest decision, I think, of how to do this.
Well, and your prediction, part of the budget? At some point?
I get
Or
the
run
impression
it as a separate bill?
I get the impression you've got a majority, I think, or Senate Republicans want it out of the budget right now.
Yeah.
So that makes it tough, number one. But if you pull it out, I don't know how you get it done without empowering minority. I mean, there's not a great option right now that I see.
The challenge was Abley and Barrett, both Ds, were challenged to lobby Democratic legislators. Well, City of Milwaukee Democratic legislators support it. Senator Harris does. Senator Taylor does. She wants even more state money. So does Abley get on the phone and call Janet Bewley up in northern Wisconsin and say, can you support it? I mean, do you see Abley and Barrett working outstate Democrats?
What would their incentive be? They have no more incentive than outside Republicans to vote for this thing. It's not part of their district. They don't. I mean, I guess I don't get the impression from people that there's an incentive for anybody outside of Milwaukee to support it. And oh, by the way, if you're the minority, it's not your job. They're their majority party. It's they run the show, so they're supposed to deliver the votes. In their minds, at least.
Who's got the biggest problem with this? City of Milwaukee Democratic legis?
Bigger problem voting for it?
No, the biggest problem getting approval of the Bucks Arena and voting against the budget.
So the county was cut out, so they have to work with the county board because the way it was done is collecting the debt. So that's not a problem. The city's going to have an issue. You have 2 council members running against Barrett ready for mayor next spring.
Right.
I'm sure they'll raise some stink about that. So there's that issue to resolve. But I think the legislature, they've got the biggest issue because, again, it's in or out. Where do you put it? How do you get it done?
Okay, if I'm a City of Milwaukee Democrat and I want prevailing wages paid, I want minority subcontractors hired on a new Bucks Arena, I want to find a way to get to yes on this, don't I?
Possibly. You can make those conditions. Again, you go back to how much you give the minority, what can the minority ask for to get this done. So if you're talking in a Senate, you've already know that Steve Noss is a no vote in the budget for a number of reasons, which is no surprise. Steve Noss is voting against most budgets that I've seen.
In Strobel's press release last week, it has to
only vote yes if there's a repeal of prevailing wage at the local level.
Local government level, not full repeal.
But that didn't pass a committee just a few weeks ago. So so you're already down probably a few members as we sit here right today. There are a number of them who don't want to have this in the budget. Mary Lozick, for example, I talked to her this week. She represents a piece of Milwaukee County, said she will not support or has not supported raising taxes on her constituents. There is a piece in there that could raise a tax in her mind because to her, car rental fees and hotels, that's out-of-state visitors, right? But food and beverage, those are her constituents. Go out for dinner with your significant other, that's on you.
Go downtown.
So she's not a fan of that piece.
Yes.
So you start picking through the onion, you got a lot of people having an incentive, again, to support this.
Yet, standing beside the governor was Assembly Speaker Voss and Senate Majority Leader Fitzgerald.
Yep.
So it's clear that they've signed on to this plan. They're going to do all they can to get it passed.
And they're going to sell it as, look, if you look at the original deal that Governor Walker was proposing, it was all state money. $220 million the state would borrow, pay for it, the jock taxes, et cetera.
Right.
Now the locals have bought in their minds. So yes, there is criticism that the debt collection is, mythical money, doesn't really exist.
Right.
But there is a local buy-in in their minds. You might see some people push for more of a buy-in from the owners. Naming rights, who gets that money? How does that go toward this piece
That question
proposal?
went unanswered at yesterday's press conference.
So you might see some more calls for stuff. But again, in the Senate, when you've got 19 members in the Republican caucus and 17 you need to pass something, you empower people to be able to lever demands. I need this, this, and this.
The
complicates things.
The sports gods that we cheeseheads worship, Packers first, then Brewers, but the Bucks outstate.
No.
No
remember-
no support?
What Van Wangard said yesterday, I want to get out of the business of doing public funding for arenas, period.
Okay.
You know, he's not a big fan of the Milwaukee tax. You know, there are bills out there, discussions of, can we take our county out? Can we end it in Racine County? Well, if Racine County ends it, you can be sure that Waukesha and Washington, they're going to want to end it. So they're not big fans of this. I mean, the one that passed with taxpayer support was up in Brown County. That tax is ending this fall, if I remember correctly. But it wasn't like it's a slam dunk vote.
Right.
15 years ago now that was, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
So.
it's interesting. Okay, so we have the math at least nailed down on the Bucks Arena. We don't have the politics, as we've been discussing.
They're taking a breath right now, I think, and trying to figure that out.
But another impasse seemed to worsen last week on transportation.
Yes.
When the governor again said, borrowing $1.3 billion, as he recommended in February, no fee increases, no registration, no gas tax increase, quote, a reasonable approach. Well, then Speaker Voss said, okay, I'm going to up the ante. Quote, maybe there should be no new bonding. If we're not going to create any new revenues, maybe we have no new bonding. Now, you and I know that's not going to happen. We're bonding in the current budget at $991 million.
Yep.
The governor recommended 30% more, 1.3. If there's no new bonding for transportation in this budget, it shuts down projects across the state.
Yes, there's still has federal money coming in that they can move around to keep things going. But the problem is that with Walker's plan, according to the LFB, with the papers that are about budget, we go to 22.3 cents per dollar just toward debt starting in 16-17.
Debt service, yes.
That is an unsustainable level, according to lawmakers I've talked to, Republicans I've talked to, that we can't keep doing this. Their feeling is the governor's plan kicks the can down the road.
Yep.
There's this undercurrent in the Capitol of no matter what happens in 16, Governor Walker's not running for election in 2018.
Right.
So he'll go away in 3 years, one way or another, and we'll have this bigger problem to deal with.
Right.
Nygren this week told me we need to have a discussion with Walker now about what's your position going to be in 2 years. Does it mean no fee increases in 2 years? Because he's led, I plan on being chair in 2 years. I don't want this problem again in 2 years.
Yeah, and the same lawmaker, Representative Nygren, told me, quote, if it takes another week to get it right, that's fine.
Yes, they're in a staring contest right now.
They are. And isn't this the only leverage? Is this the only leverage they have over Governor Walker, who, wants to sign a budget and then announce for president? Well, the longer they hold up his budget, does that delay his presidential announcement?
Talking to some of his backers, they're not too worried about it just yet, about the timing.
Okay.
But the farther it goes, the kind of more difficult it gets. Let's say, in theory, Finance passes the budget next week. It takes 10 days to draft. They could be on the floor then the last 2 weeks of June, get it done. The governor, he's got a few days to sign it by July 1. So it still can be done by July 1. But they're running out of time to be done by July 1st. Go back and look back after November when the governor won re-election. He was saying, let's pass this budget quickly because we want to show that we are the opposite of dysfunction in D.C. We can get this thing done quickly and get it knocked out.
Right.
Well, when they passed it last 2 times in mid-June, as early as it had been done since 77, I think it was. So they've been quick before. The governor obviously wants this thing done end of May-ish, sign it early June and get out of town. Lawmakers saying up until a month ago, Memorial Day. Then they went, oh, wait a second, Memorial Day is early this year, end of May.
Right.
Now,
we sit here on June 5.
Which was, I think, if I remember right, 2 years ago at 5 a.m., I was walking out of the finance room with the budget finally out of finance. So we're right at that same kind of window, if you will, that were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but you said, okay, horse trading is illegal, but
Absolutely.
How about deals? Do you think if some legislator asked the governor, I might be more interested in the Bucks Arena if you show me some give on raising the vehicle registration fee? Possible trade?
You can make those demands, but Governor Walker has said it's a tax increase. Governor Walker is going to run for president. Governor Walker does not want to go to Iowa and try and sell a gas tax increase or a fee increase.
Governor Walker doesn't want to lose the Bucks.
That's right. What's fascinating is if you talk to members of finance, I've talked to 4 Senate Republican members of finance who said I would be open to a gas tax hike, even in like this environment.
Okay.
Tiffany, Olson, Harsdorf, Markline have all said, yeah, I mean, to them it's a user fee, and it also captures people traveling into Wisconsin to raise revenue. There are members like Nygren who said, yeah, we should look at a fee increase. So here are your choices, finance. You can pass a fee increase, lower the bonding, and then dare the governor to veto it. Great. You also make Governor Walker a conservative hero because he's even have his own party saying no new,
Yeah.
fees and
Read
taxes.
my lips, I know.
You could say, okay, we are going to lower the bonding, and numbers keep hearing like to $500 to $800 million. So it's 1.3 down to that. Lower the bonding, and we're going to delay the projects. Pick which ones are going to get done. That makes you the bad guy. And oh, by the way, your caucus has to figure out whose projects get done.
Right.
I mean, some will be unhappy. Or third, you don't do the fee increase. You send them walk or the lower bonding and say, okay, you pick which projects to
You're the bad
delay.
guy.
Oh, by the way, the zoo will get most of the money. It already does now.
Yep.
But they want to keep that on track. That is 3/4 of our commerce goes to that intersection right now. Or that's where the money's interchange. That's where the money's going to go.
And the zoo interchange, $1.6 billion. So who blinks in this impasse? No, you go back to your turn. Stare down.
Darren, good question. I mean, finance is in no rush right now to get going. So what do they do? There is a reality, though, that if you take on the governor, he has the veto pen. It's hard to beat a governor with the veto pen. Do you really want to try and override a governor of your own party? Do you want to try that? I mean, that's a tough choice. for them
Soon to be
make.
the 11th presidential candidate.
Yes.
Interesting.
But then
Fascinating.
again, you have this long-term problem of they can't do this anymore, the level of bonding.
Or else we become New Jersey, whereas Chris Christie's a governor.
You know, maybe you could, I mean, if there were more GPR, you could find a way to kind of ease it.
Yeah.
But so you maybe have to hope 2 years from now GPR picks up and you can transfer more over. But
Oh,
right
yeah.
now,
governing
not
by
an option.
governing by
Yeah.
fingers crossed.
Yes.
But on a very serious note, tremendously emotional testimony this week on the bill that would ban abortions after 20 weeks. And this is part of a trend. Again, you have a public hearing on a Tuesday. You have a committee vote on a Thursday, and it should be before the Senate next Tuesday, right?
That was the plan.
That was a plan. Okay, let's listen to some of the most emotional testimony. One speaker arguing for the bill and one speaker arguing against it.
Our 35-week ultrasound showed that there was a severe abnormality regarding our child's brain. Upon a second opinion, the specialist told us that our baby was missing part of his brain and would not survive. The doctor told us that we had the option of terminating the pregnancy because my life would be in jeopardy. We refused. Under the circumstances, the specialist informed us again that the best option would be to decompress the baby's head, killing him, and giving us a chance to try again to have a family. 13 long minutes after he was born, our son took his first breath. He was here, a child to hold and love, and he was alive. Today, Bryce is 11 years old and doing terrific. He is in 5th grade and does very well in school. The boy that was supposed to die after birth, the boy who would never function, he is alive and well and nothing but a joy to our lives. I cannot imagine what would have happened if we allowed our son to lose his life to abortion.
When finding out that I was pregnant for the third time, I was very excited. A part of me knew it was a girl, but also part of me knew something wasn't right. During our ultrasound, we were told it was a girl. The look of joy on my husband's face, I will never forget. I pictured her with black curly hair, just like mine. Dr. B said it was a lethal pregnancy, and Rose was suffering and we had to terminate. But ultimately, I think God made that decision for us. On March 10th, 2013, the day of our daughter, Rose was born. It was rainy and foggy. My husband grabbed my hand, and Rose came out at 11 pounds, 4 ounces. The nurse dressed her and placed her in our arms. If you can imagine that pain that we endured. She was wrapped up because there were so many cysts on her body. Think of the most unnatural thing, leaving your daughter in your room in a bassinet as you hear other women crying, babies crying. I had to kiss my lifeless baby and leave her just to bury her 2 days later. This is my story. Rose was very much wanted. We didn't want to take the easy way out. I ask that you please consider what my family went through and what future families are going through and give them the option to choose.
JR, 2 questions on the abortion bill. Is there any doubt in your mind that it's got the votes to pass the Senate? No, that's question number 1. Number 2, do you think the Assembly takes it before it acts on the budget?
The Senate would not take it up on the floor unless it had the votes. I talked to Mary Lozick, one of the co-authors this week. She did not anticipate any amendments. There was a lot of talk in the hearing on Tuesday about exceptions for rape and incest, and the people behind the bill have been knocking that down, saying those are decisions that are made right away. You know that immediately, so it's not a decision that factors into an abortion at the 20th week.
Yeah.
So they think they got the votes to pass it as is. Robin Vos in the Assembly has said they have to caucus on it. He had previously raised concerns about not having those exceptions for rape and incest. They become almost like this standard, if you will, with abortion bills, because vulnerable lawmakers know that there will be ads run saying that you are subjecting rape victims, incest victims, to having to carry out a child against their will. You know, it may not be always accurate, but they're ads. I mean, they can be very powerful and damaging to a lawmaker in a swing seat trying to hold on to his or her seat.
On such an emotional issue.
So that is a big issue. And it seems like when I ask people about the abortion issue in Wisconsin, they will tell you that the average Wisconsinite doesn't like abortion. They don't want it to be illegal. But okay, make it hard to get. So that's the kind of the big mushy middle, if you will. You've got your wings of both parties who are very anti-abortion, very pro-choice. That middle is where things are kind of hammered out, and that's kind of where people are. Where do you find that sweet spot, if you will, of that meeting that people are comfortable with it out?
And the stats are very interesting. The last State Department of Health Services report, 6,400 abortions performed in 2013. 70% decline from the high in the 1980s. And just one more stat before we go to a different subject. Of the 6,400 abortions performed in 2013, only 1% were done on fetuses that were more than 20 weeks old. It's just interesting. Okay, now let's talk some more politics.
Okay.
State Democrats on Saturday will elect a new chairman.
Yes, they will.
Then there were 5, and now there were 4.
Yes.
Former Representative Jeff Smith withdrew.
Announced yesterday evening he was withdrawing from the race and asking his supporters to back Martha Lanning.
Surprise you? Surprise me.
Well, considering a week ago he was telling delegates in a letter that if he wins, he's going to make Martha the executive director of the party.
Which surprised her.
Now, what's interesting is you had a 5-way race, now 4.
Yep.
It is a one-shot deal. So they do one vote between, I think, 12:30 and 2 tomorrow. Whoever gets 25, 26% can be the new chair.
Right.
So it kind of creates a free-for-all, if you will, of it doesn't take a lot. You have the majority to win. With Smith dropping out, I mean, it's hard to know exactly how much support they had because you're talking 1,300 or so delegates. Majority of which, by the way, are from Dane and Milwaukee counties.
That's where those are the 2 power bases of the Democratic Party.
You know which number 3 is? Waukesha County.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating. Followed by Brown. Well, okay. Go ahead.
But if you can get a coalition of 35%, you're in pretty good shape. Jason Ray, DNC member, he's in good position because he's from Milwaukee. That's his power base. Milwaukee's where the convention is. A lot of folks are going to be around there, know him. That helps him a great deal. Joe Winnicke, past chair, he's from power base of Dane County. But it's kind of seen as a 3-way race with Winnicke, Lanning, and Ray, and even was when Jeff Smith was still in.
Yeah.
Does Jeff Smith's move have enough to kind of like push Martha past the threshold to win? Now, interesting is
I think maybe
Jeff Smith offered Martha Lanning a job, or promised her a job, in a letter. Will Martha Lanning then give Jeff Smith a job if she wins? I talked to them both last night. They said no, there's no job offer.
Yeah, I was intrigued that you interviewed them both, and Lanning said, I have no deal with Jeff Smith.
But if Martha Lanning wins and Jeff Smith gets a job, there's going to be like, what happened there?
Okay, final note on the convention. The comeback kid of the convention is Feingold. Now, he's not doing one-on-one interviews, but he's going to give this speech. They've teed him up to give the final speech, rah-rah. What's he going to say?
What's he going to say? Good question.
Comeback kid?
This is his.
Remember me?
This is his base, though. I mean, remember, 3 years ago, I think it was, he spoke to convention in Conomowoc. He said, I'm not going to be a candidate in 12, 13, 14, or something like that. 13, 14, or 15, hint, hint, like I'm coming back in 16. He's been gone for a couple of years, well, not a couple of years, but for a long period of time with being an envoy to Africa for the State Department. Republicans making a big deal about that, and he's teaching at Stanford until I think he wrapped up like sometime this spring. They're trying to make the case he's out of touch. He's been gone for a while. It's Radical Russ. That's their website now. This guy is the same guy who voted for Obamacare and the stimulus. We're going to beat him up on that.
Right.
It's a chance for Russ Feingold to kind of reintroduce himself to people, like what's his cause going to be going forward. I bet he's going to talk about trade deals are bad.
Yes.
It's been a favorite of his.
He's against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, so he's still against his president.
Still against the president.
And he's going to say, and I was right to vote to be the only vote against the Patriot Act.
Because now they did the USA Freedom Act.
Yep.
Sensenbrenner co-authored. So it's a chance for him to kind of remind people what they liked about him before. Now, the issue for Feingold, there are several, but one of them is, remember, he was turned out 5 years ago. He's got to convince people to vote against him then to vote for him now. Now, he is helped by the fact there'll be a more Democratic turnout next year because it's a presidential year.
Yes.
But look at Hillary Clinton's numbers. When she left State Department, she was in the 60s. As she got more political, i.e. running for president, her numbers dropped. Wolf Feingold's good aura, if you will, that we saw in the Marquette poll a month or so ago, will that start to shrink a little bit once they start going, okay, this is not just Russ Feingold, the guy I remember, it's Russ Feingold who is actually engaged in the political arena and has these positions that I have forgotten about maybe a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, final topic. Update us on the governor who wants to be president, because now there are 10 with the addition of Rick Perry and Lindsey Graham.
He went from his boyhood home in Delavan, boyhood town of Delavan, where he stopped and said again, no gas tax increase, no registration fee increase. Went from there to Atlanta. Went over to Florida, did the cattle call that Rick Scott put on for presidential contenders on the GOP side. He is either on his way to North Carolina or going there soon to speak to the Republican State Convention tonight. He's back in Iowa tomorrow. He's doing Joni Ernst Harley ride, doing a ride and then like some kind of roast afterward. And doing an event with Senator Grassley. So he is again like spending a good part of his time out. And now what's interesting is he's also going to Canada a week from today.
Trade mission next week.
Trade mission gone for a week. This is the sweet spot of lobbying for the Bucks deal to get done. He's not going to be here for a good part of that. Is that going to impact the deal? I don't know. He came back yesterday and kind of owned it, really pushed hard for this thing.
But he also said yesterday, I'm on the phone 10 or 12 times a day checking with my budget team.
What I hear from lawmakers is he's engaged in that way, but the bully pulpit part of being governor is not there. He's not out he did a couple stops this week, but he wasn't doing stop after stop after stop saying, I need this in the budget. Call your lawmakers, tell them this. Selling the Bucks deal, is he doing a statewide tour and sell the Bucks deal? No. I haven't seen that yet.
No,
so if you're committed to it, the Governor Walker we know of old, when he wants something, he's in La Crosse and Eau Claire and Wausau and Green Bay.
4 media markets in one day. You bet.
Over and over again selling things. And he hasn't been doing that. And that's impeded some things, maybe in terms of like him getting what he wants. At the same time, the things he really wants. He wants to say, your property taxes are going to be lower in 16 than in 10. Still sell at the campaign trail nationally. He can say, we're going to require people in public assistance to get a hand up, not a hand out. We're going to require them to take drug testing so they can get a job. He's going to say all these things. I think raise taxes in tough times. They're all the things he wants to sell in the campaign trail nationally. He still gets those. He lost, though, EW Authority. His long-term care changes. They were revamped. I mean, the mergers, they're all gone. Most of what he wants to sell, though, nationally at least, is still there. So in that way, it's not that bad for him.
And just a final PS on this. The last poll of Iowa, he was number 1 last week, wasn't he?
17%.
17%, which is 7 percentage points ahead of Bush and Rubio?
Yeah, and it's been fairly constant. He's been in that 17 to 22% range, even people coming in. So he's in a good spot in Iowa. That's why you see him there all the time. He's making that a second home right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's no WisPolitics stock report because of the Democratic convention.
Be back next week.
And we will give a summary of that convention, talk about Russ and what we heard next week. I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Russ.
And that's Rewind for June 5.